Hello everybody, our session is Open Sesame, picking locks with Cortana, which means that we'll show you a number of cool ways in which you could hack into locked Windows machines using voice commands and Cortana. I'm Amichai Shulman, together with me Tal Bier, my colleague, and young students from the Technion College in Israel, Ron Marcovich and Yuval Ron. What do we have today? We'll start by trying to understand what Cortana is. It's not trivial, and how it's built. And then we'll show you how we set up on a project to attack different aspects of that Cortana system. And of course, we'll demonstrate a number of vulnerabilities that we're able to find along the way in the agent itself, malicious voice commands, and of course, malicious extensions, which we'll talk about. We'll talk a little bit about how we can defend against voice-activated attacks and Cortana attacks in general, and conclude with a summary. So without further ado, let's try understanding what Cortana is. Now, most of us think of Cortana as the voice interface into my laptop. In reality, it's a whole different thing. Microsoft says it's your intelligent assistant across your life, big thing. In practice, it is an intent resolution system. It takes human intent and translates it into computer actions, be those browsing the web, displaying information, or launching programs. And the beautiful thing about Cortana is that as an engineering decision, it's very universal. It's built on top of the universal Windows platforms. So while it is available on the relatively straightforward platform you'd think about, which are the mobile phone and the smart home speaker, it is also available by default on other Windows platforms such as laptops, desktops, and so on. And as I mentioned, it's not a voice interface. It's an intent resolution system. It doesn't care about the source of the intent. So Cortana can take voice as input, but as we learned, also keyboard, mouse, touch, whatever, and this is an important thing to remember when we go on with this presentation. Quick look at how Cortana is built. So on the left side, we have the Cortana client. It's a hefty agent installed on your machine, very capable, does lots of things, takes no decision by itself. It just grabs the input, the digitized speech, send it to the Cortana service in the cloud, receive action to be performed in the format that we call card, we'll show that later, and executes it. Does no decision making in between. Now, the Cortana cloud, this is where the brains are. It takes the digitized speech, goes through speech to text, gets the text, then takes the text, send it to the intent resolution engine, the text to intent, which generates a formal definition of an action with its parameters. Then, based on the action selected, it sends it to a plugin in the Cortana service. And that plugin takes the action, takes the parameters, and resolves the action, most often using some third-party web service. Most of those plugins are created by Microsoft. But third parties can add plugins into that system using the Cortana Skills framework and extend that resolution process. And at the end of this resolution process, we see card data that goes back into the platform and then being sent back to the client for rendering. Let's take a simple scenario. Who is George Washington? So this is speech going to the cloud, goes to the speech to text. We get this text. Who is George Washington? Client gets it back just for display purposes. So the client says, now resolve this for me. It goes into the resolution engine, and the result is an action called search with a query parameter, George Washington. What do we do with this? We go to a plugin that does search, based on Microsoft Bing, of course, and that plugin interacts with the web through Bing, gets the data probably from Wikipedia, a reliable source, brings it back, send it to the platform in the shape of a card which says, display this picture here, display this text here, add a link here, and so on. This gets translated to the actual card, which you see is a whole lot of HTML and JavaScript, and that gets rendered on our screen. So what do we have? We have the Cortana agent, who is a very fat client, very powerful, can do everything on your machine, run processes, display files, whatnot. It is on by default, and it works by default on the locked screen. Now, there is some interesting mechanism there with another runtime, but the end result is that using voice, the search UI.exe process can interact with the locked screen. Then, as I said, most of the processing happens in the cloud. It happens in two phases: speech resolution, the audio processing, and then the semantic processing. Each has its own URL. There's a lot of machine learning involved in that cloud platform, and it's used mainly for two purposes. One is making speech to text better, which we don't care about in this presentation at least. And the other is extending the intent resolution capabilities. So constantly understanding more intents and finding ways to translating them into what we presumably meant to do. Audio processing is very simple. These are basically WebSockets opened from the client to the Cortana service. Audio is streamed one way, partial resolution of the text is streamed the other way, and then when the client machine decides that the audio session is finished, it gets final results from the cloud. It then asks the cloud to resolve and gets back what you see here. It's a lot of mumble-jumble HTML and JavaScript. If we zoom in, we see this is the result of the go to CNN.com intent. So you see here an API call that launches a browser process on the client machine and navigates that process to www.cnn.com. As I said, Cortana can be extended using skills. The code for extending Cortana is deployed and run exclusively on the cloud. So there is no third-party code running on the client machine as part of the Cortana skill framework. The way it works is that each skill has an invocation name, and when Cortana finds in the input that invocation name, it uses the new skill as the plugin to work on that intent, and any further input in that session goes into the skill, which interacts with the client machine using the card interface. We'll talk about it later. On the right side, you can see some of the skills of the third-party extensions that already exist on the Microsoft site. This is a more elaborate figure at how it works. The bottom line of this figure is to show you that there are a lot of APIs in the way, in the sense that one would not expect any way for the skill code to adversely affect the client machine, okay, because of all the interactions there. So we have the fat client that executes on a locked screen and can do virtually anything on our machine. The choice of action is made through cloud logic, which can be changed without any apparent notice and is controlled, at least partly, by machine learning. You know what that means? It means that no one really knows what is going to happen there, and that with time, this can change. And of course, choice of action can be, as I said, affected by third-party plugins. This is the point where we'll all ask ourselves, what can possibly go wrong with that? And you know, we got the answer from Edward A. Murphy, and he says anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So we took this answer and said, let's put it to test. And together with the Technion College in Israel and other graduate students that worked with us, we mapped the interfaces of the various components of Cortana. Our assumption was that each individual component is safe and sound. And we expected the vulnerabilities to come from the way that these components were combined together. Because, quite honestly, we didn't think that someone looked at the entire system and asked the question, can my computer be hacked with voice? Now, yeah, they probably did ask that question. This is why you cannot say, hey, Cortana, format my computer, okay? But apparently, some of the things that we say have very, very similar effect to that, and we'll show that. In fact, we try to look at vulnerabilities in the Cortana agent and the fact that it doesn't just accept voice input, but other types of input. We tried expressing bad intent, which we'll show in a second. We wrote malicious third-party plugins, of course, and we even tried to provide bad content to existing plugins. And guess what? We were successful in each and every one of those interfaces. And you will see some of our success in the following part of the session. So, starting with the demo of an open Sesame vulnerability, I invite Ron and Yuval.
Thank you. Thank you, Amichai. Hello, everyone. My name is Yuval Ron, and I'm going to show you now our first demo of Open Sesame vulnerability. As you can see, now in this demo, I'm going to show you how to see the preview of private photos and how to read the content of sensitive files using Open Sesame. Everything works while your computer is locked using Cortana. So now we are on the locked screen, as you see. The attacker comes to your PC and launches Cortana by saying, hey Cortana. Let's see it. Here's the locked screen.
Cortana.
You heard, hey Cortana. Cortana is opened, and then the attacker immediately pressed the keyboard, and this search dialog opened. Well, this opened because Cortana and the Windows search dialog are basically the same process. So what can the attacker do now? He can search for names of files and folders. For example, he will search for photos, and here we write a name of a file, choosing the photo tab, and here are the victim's photo with his family. Now he looks very happy, but after this attack, he won't be so happy. We will continue. Maybe there is a file named password. It will be very attractive. So we will search it. And, oh, we found it. There is a file named password. Sadly, we cannot just click on it because it will be opened behind the lock screen. But by simply hover the mouse on it, we can read its content. So the password for the bank is, where is my money? And it's a great question. And the password for Facebook is, do not share this. Well, we share it right now at Black Hat, so sadly it's been shared. And as you can see, we can search for names of files and photos and also other things. Now Ron will continue and demonstrate the second demo.
All right, so thank you, Yuval. Now I'm going to show you how we can run an executable on a locked PC. So yeah, let's start. We store our executable on a USB flash drive. So let's start by inserting it.
Hey Cortana.
All right, so we inserted the USB flash drive, then we launch Cortana. Now using the exact same vulnerability, we have the search dialog as you've seen before. And if we write now the full path of the executable, which is stored under drive E, which is the USB flash drive, and it is called song.exe. Now we can find the file, we can click it, and it will run as we will see shortly. But we can also run as administrator if for some reason UEC is disabled. So let's hear a song for now. All right, so for this case it was a song, but it can be malware or anything else that we want. So to conclude, we have seen how we can run an executable, and we have seen how we can see private files and documents, and Tal will take you from here. Thank you.
Yeah, big round of applause to Yuval and Ron. After all, they represent the future of our community. So let's recap what we just saw. So the impact of this Open Sesame vulnerability, by abusing an evil-made attacker can gain full control over locked machine. Everything was on locked machine. So what is the evil-made attack model? Attackers that have some temporal physical access to the computer while the computer is locked. And why it's called evil-made? Well, just think about the laptop that you left last night when you went to party. You probably left it in your hotel room. Just imagine that the maid that came to clean your room known about this Cortana vulnerability and executed a command on your computer. So I see some people moving uncomfortably in their chairs. But don't be taken away by the specific wording. It's more than just evil maids in a hotel and black hat and so on. It can happen also during borders control check when they inspect your laptop, or even in very everyday scenario when you take a break at work, lock your computer and go out to a meeting or to have lunch or something like that. And your computer is locked, but other people may have physical access to it. So we have to ask ourselves, why didn't lock screen stop that? Come on, lock screen, you had one job. But we have to understand that lock screen is not magic. Lock screen is very simple. It's just another desktop, separate desktop. All your application is in one desktop and the UI in that. And we have a dedicated desktop that originally only contained the WinLogon process. So one process, very secure one. And that's why it was secure, because it contained only one process and this process was secure. And it should be natural to understand that if we allow more and more application, more and more functionality on lock screen, and these processes are not necessarily as secure as WinLogon, then lock screen security will be reduced as the attack surface expands. Let's take a look at the evolution of the lock screen. So not long ago, this was your lock screen. This is Win7 lock screen. You can only input your password. What a dull desktop. But now with Win10, we have a lot of opportunities, a lot of fun stuff we can do, even when the computer is locked. We can go to Microsoft Store, we can search something, learn about the picture, connect to networks, and so on and so forth. So it's clear that there is more and more functionality on lock screen, and as a result, the security of it is reduced. And let's talk about the root cause of this vulnerability. Lock screen does its job as it should. It restricts keyboard from reaching to the application, but it allows Cortana invocation through voice, again by design. We click something, by default Cortana is allowed to work on lock screen. But once Cortana is invoked with voice, lock screen no longer can restrict it in any way. So if Cortana is willing to accept keyboard typing, even if the computer is locked, then Cortana will get this keyboard typing. So this was the root cause of the vulnerability, and the fix was to make Cortana search that specific part of Cortana, make it aware of the UI state. So there's one functionality for the search UI when the computer is locked, and another functionality more limited when the computer is locked, or the other way around if I mixed it up. So this represents an implicit shift of responsibility. In the past, the operating system took the responsibility of blocking all interaction with the UI when the computer is locked, and the developer didn't have to worry about it. But now, for certain applications that can work on a lock screen, the developer, it's their responsibility to check the UI state and behave accordingly, change the behavior when the UI is locked and when the UI is unlocked. And so let's talk a little bit about timing here. So we reported that vulnerability to Microsoft on mid-April. A week later, McAfee also reported the same vulnerability independently, so great minds think alike. And Microsoft was very quick to patch in less than 2 months, and also paid a bug bounty for our young researchers here, which enabled them to come here to Black Hat. So thank you, Microsoft. Let's give them the thank you, Microsoft. However, don't worry, we continue to bite the hand that fed us. And we reported yet another vulnerability just a month ago, and Microsoft are working on it. We were assigned with the CVE, and Microsoft is working about releasing a patch for it, so we cannot discuss the details right now, but we surely will be able to talk about it once it's patched. So let's sum it up for this vulnerability. So the impact evil made attackers can get full control on a locked machine, and the fix is very tactical. It just fix something with Cortana Search UI. But there are many other components to Cortana, and if any one of them is not aware of the state and can run on a locked computer, then the same problem will repeat itself. And in fact, that's what we found out in the vulnerability. We cannot discuss the details. So the design lesson is adding more capability to lock screen is very tempting because it's so empty, but very dangerous on the other hand. And with that, let's move on to another set of vulnerabilities. And this one handles cruel intention, the voice of Esau. So if the Open Sesame was concerned with local commands through lock screen, attacking the FAT client itself, the FAT agent, this kind of vulnerability is by the attacker will express bad intention and cause bad actions. And again, the attack scenario is evil-made attack, and this attack was first presented earlier this year in the Kaspersky SAS. And the attacker need to achieve man-in-the-middle position, which is very easy when they have physical access to a computer. They just plug into the network interface. And then they express, they say something that would invoke unsafe browsing, and unsafe in the sense that it goes to a non-SSL protected website. And when the request goes out, the man in the middle, the attackers are able to change the response into something malicious, for example, code that 0-day for browser, or code that like responder that elicit all kind of network authentication and steals the credentials for the network. So let's take a look at it in a bit more graphical manner. So the attacker is in. It connects to the network interface card. Interesting, it needs also to make sure that the computer is now connected to the internet, because as we saw, as Amichai said, the brains of Cortana is over the internet. So we must make sure that the computer connects to it. And then the attacker said, hey Cortana, go to some website, which is served not over SSL. The voice goes to Cortana Cloud, and the action card returns and commands that computer to browse to HTTP, not HTTPS, bbc.com, and the attacker, which is man in the middle, is able to take that and respond with some malicious code. So let's see a demo of it right now.
Hey Cortana. Go to CNN.com.
Sure thing. I'll take you to CNN.com.
And we can see that even though the computer is locked, a browser browsed to CNN.com, and we can see, at least guys on the first row, that there is no padlock there. It's not served over HTTPS, so if there was a attacker man in the middle, it could have replaced that with anything that they want. And there's more to it, and we can take this attack not just for initial infection, but also for lateral movement. A lateral movement means that the attacker already is present on has infected a single machine, for example, by attacking with Voice of Esau, but it could be with any other attack vector, and then they want to expand to more computers within the network. And again, so what they need to do, they need to achieve man in the middle position, but now they don't have physical access, so they need to do something else. So, for example, they can do all kind of routing poisoning attack, such as ARP spoofing, and achieve man in the middle position within the network. And then they need to invoke unsafe browsing on neighboring computers. So one thing they can do, they can just play a sound file, so neighboring computer, through the speakers of the infected machine. So neighboring computers hear that and will invoke unsafe browsing. The attacker is man in the middle, and as before, can serve malicious content. And there's another possibility is not to play sound, but use RDP, remote desktop protocol, to send sound as network buffer to the machine. And I call it as the silent killer, RDP, because there won't be any audio in the room if you're doing it via remote desktop. And you can configure your own client to do so. For example, the MSTSC, you can just map the voice to go to the remote computer, as if it was recorded on the remote computer microphone. And let's see a demo of just that. I will connect to a remote machine using RDP and activate the Cortana on the remote machine. So let's see that. So this is the remote machine over RDP. I'm locking it.
Hey Cortana, show me some videos.
So I'm asking Cortana for some task.
I pulled up some videos for you.
Thank you, Cortana. And now let's log in and see if on the remote computer and see that indeed Cortana has fulfilled my request on the remote computer using RDP. So a little bit of timeline. We reported this vulnerability to Microsoft last year. Microsoft patched it with some cloud patch, so no CVE, very quickly, 2 weeks after. We had discussed this vulnerability in Kaspersky SaaS earlier this year. And again, about a month ago, we reported another vulnerability of the same nature to Microsoft. And so let's recap on the impact. Evil maid or even remote attacker can invoke unsafe browsing, even on a locked machine, and using additional vulnerabilities are able to take over it. And once more, like with previous vulnerability to fix is very tactical. Microsoft had blocked this way of initiating unsafe browsing, but not every avenue was fixed, and this is the nature of the new vulnerability that, again, we cannot disclose right now because Microsoft hadn't patched it. And as in before, the design lessons that adding more capabilities to lock screen is very tempting, yet dangerous. And with that, I'll give Amichai the mic to describe another set of vulnerabilities.
So this one, we call them, of course, the scale of death, because we're using Cortana Skills to employ them. And as Tal said, we could take the existing Cortana plugins, okay, and using specified intents, make them malicious what happens when we do not have the patience to go through all the possibilities and just want to create our own bad intent to begin with? We'll probably try to do that using a malicious Cortana skill, our extension to the interpretation mechanism. As I mentioned, skills have very limited interaction with the client machine. It's not even through the actual card data, which I showed, the HTML and the JavaScript. Skills cannot directly touch that. Skills have a very limited JSON API to say what they want to be on that card. So how do we translate that into something malicious? So what we did is we looked into all the possible actions that can be taken with a Cortana Skills on the machine, on the client machine, and there are, again, showing text, showing videos, playing some music, and as we found out, there's a way to instruct the client machine to invoke a browser process behind the scenes and make that browser process navigate to a URL chosen by the third-party skill. So clearly, even with the this basic capability, we can write a malicious skill that navigates the browser on the client machine to an attacker-controlled site using this very simple code, and that site would deliver browser exploits into that machine and would take over that machine. And if that's not enough, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the extended URI schema in Windows, there is a way to specially craft those URIs, those URLs, to not just invoke a browser process, but invoke many other programs on the Windows machine. Specifically, you can invoke any of the Microsoft Office family programs using a specially crafted URL. And this is what you see on the right side. Okay? We're able, using a URL, to invoke the Microsoft Word process and make it open a document that we own on the web, and then send Microsoft Word exploits, for example, to that computer, or PowerPoint, or Excel, and whatnot. So we have an easy way to write a malicious Cortana skill that would take over a locked machine if we could run it on a locked screen. As you can see here, we have a document on the web, we lock the machine, invoke Cortana.
Hey Cortana, ask Trivia Mania question.
Trivia Mania is our third-party malicious plugin. Once that plugin was invoked, as you will see now, in the background, Microsoft Office Word was launched and accessed our document. So we almost have a complete attack. I'm saying almost because in order to run third-party plugins, you need, as a user of that machine, to give consent, okay? Because it's a third-party plugin. Turns out that you can give consent from a locked screen. You'll see that in this next video.
Ask NoMail if I have new messages.
That's just a third-party plugin we used.
First, sign in with NoMail.
Notice this interaction happens even before consent, okay? Just to give you an idea of this mechanism. And once we're done with this interaction...
May I have your permission?
Of course! So we have a complete attack. We have a complete attack scenario where we write a very simple third-party plugin with no malicious code in it published that, and now we can generate these kind of proximity evil-made attacks that would take over any locked machine. Timeline, well, actually Guy Pfefferman and the Fig Friedberg were able to detect the issue with the consent from locked screen back in March. We didn't realize what the meaning of that was until Netanella Brod and Matan Puget from the Technion in June found the ways to actually turn that into a complete takeover scenario. Microsoft was quick to fix that on June 25th. It has no CVE, you know why? Because it was fixed on the cloud. And since it's fixed on the cloud, nobody knows about it. And the fix was such that not only you cannot give consent to run a third-party plugin or use a third-party plugin from locked screen, you cannot use any third-party plugin now, any Cortana skill from the locked screen. And of course, the reason, Tal talked about it. Adding functionality to locked screen is a very slippery slope. You start by having secure Microsoft code, then you have not so secure Microsoft code, and then you have third-party code running on your locked machine. Clearly that was a win for us as well. And let's talk a little bit about protection, Tal.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of the presentation, so we cannot leave you only with problems. Let's try to find some solution. So the first solution that comes to mind is maybe we should use speaker identification and train the system to respond only to the authorized user, and by that, not to the attacker. And there's a switch like that, it's not default, that try to respond only to me. Well, the try doesn't sound very reassuring. It's like Microsoft saying, oh, okay, well, we can try, we don't promise anything. And in fact, there could be many ways to bypass it. For example, hey Cortana, the trigger word can be recorded and replay. And there are even more sophisticated attacks, such as the one, I'm planning to see that tomorrow at Black Hat. Your voice is my password, and they will talk about how using machine learning, they can synthesize the user voice and bypass all kinds of such restriction. So speaker identification probably is not going to cut it. So we need something else. So what we've done in the past, when we introduced new interfaces and discovered there are new attacks. For example, when we introduced network interface into computers and realized there are many attacks using this new medium, we added some compensating controls. We added firewalls to stop these attacks. So maybe we can do the same with voice. And how would we do it? So let's try first. The first take is, let's put a security microphone on each room. And there are, of course, many disadvantages to that solution. For example, privacy. We are eavesdropping to all of the, if that's corporation, to all of our employees, not just what they do with Cortana, but to everything. There's cost associated with that. There's the issue of audio directionality. For example, our microphone might not get the same signal as the protected device microphone. And even if they get the same device, they might have different machine learning behind them to understand the semantics of the command. Just a few months ago, over the internet, it went viral that the same voice file, half of the people thought it said Yanni, and half of the people said it's Laurel. So machine learning might have the same gap. And as we've shown with RDP, sometimes the attacks, even voice attacks, are not audible because they are transferred through RDP over the network. And last problem is that this is only a detection solution. So we will be able to alert that someone expressed bad intent, but the attack will reach the computer and will attack that. So we can have only a detection solution. So we want to do something better. And for that, we now, for the first time, we suggest the first network-based intercepting proxy for voice, the first voice firewall. And to do that, that proxy has to listen to the network traffic going to Cortana. But this traffic is of course encrypted with SSL, otherwise we had more vulnerabilities to show you. So to deploy it, you need to grant this proxy CA certificate and deploy it across the organization. But this is a very common practice, and it's used in most DLP data leakage prevention solutions. So it's not a real problem. And now our proxy, once it monitors all Cortana traffic, it knows the origin, because the IP, computer name, username, UI state, and so on and so forth is sent by the Cortana protocols. It sees all the request audio and text-to-speech results, and also all the intents that the Cortana cloud understands and the cards that are issued as a result. And as a proxy, it can either block them or even modify them. So when comparing it to our previous take of trying to put microphone in every room, it seems a far better solution because it's centrally located. You don't need to put microphone in every room, does not rely on audio analogic capture, and can mitigate, not just detect. So let's take a visual look of how it would look like. So we would deploy that proxy, the Newspeak proxy. We deploy the SSL certificate when we need them and connect the protected devices to that proxy. Now, when a user is attacked with fake news attack, they tell him he wants to go to CNN.com, but they don't know that it's a fake news site. So the voice goes to the cloud. The cloud says, okay, you wanted to go to CNN.com, please go to CNN.com. But we have a policy to protect against fake news site, and our proxy can issue foxnews.com. So wait with the applause, because we have a demo for that. So this is way cooler than that. So on the left-hand side, you can see the protected device. On the right-hand side, you can see the UI of our proxy implemented over Charles proxy. And let's go.
Hey Cortana, go to CNN.com.
And we can see that the proxy gets all kind of traffic. Now we get the action card that says go to CNN.com, but we are going to manually switch that into something that goes to foxnews.com. Execute.
I can't connect at the moment. Try again in a little bit.
And we got foxnews.com, and the user is saved from fake news. No more fake news for you. Thank you. Thank you. So with that, let's sum up with the final slide. 2 more slides, I promise. No, I was lying. 3 more slides. Okay, so what we've seen today, we've seen 4 sets, and this is set because there are many vulnerabilities in each of every vector. So the first one was attacking the Fed client, local commands through lock screen. Then we expressed bad intent, and we were able to elicit some non-secure browsing through that. Then Amichai showed malicious skills and even interaction with bad content provider. Now, takeaways for defenders. What can you do? So our recommendation, and for the time being, we think you should disable Cortana voice in corporate environments when you store some serious stuff on your computer, or at least on lock screen. And if you can see on the right-hand side, there are group policies to do just that. And also there's a good link on how to disable Cortana on certain Windows version. And when to reconsider when there are more compensating controls. And even if our idea of having a voice firewall seems a little bit you know, outrageous at first sight, but we do believe that if voice interfaces become common, and this is the mainstream way to interact with your computer, the only way that it will get adopted within corporate is when corporate have compensated control to protect against such attack. And last slide. So what can builders and breakers learn from that? So we think that when an innovative feature is added into existing environment, and interface is certainly such feature. It's never just an interface. It's a whole world of interacting and also interacting maliciously with the old environment. So when you do that, secure coding is not enough. As we had shown in our presentation, in most cases, there was nothing wrong. There was no buffer overflow. There wasn't any off by one. Every component sort of worked the way it was intended. But no one was looking at the big picture. No one was making sure that the end result is that the computer remains safe and lock screen, for example, is not bypassed. And we as breakers, we did just that, and we were able to find at least 3 vulnerabilities, and there are more in the way. And so this is for us, for breakers. So if you want to come next year and speak, look for such new interfaces, try to attack them. Most likely you will be able to find some low-hanging fruits, like we did. And also the same lesson for builders. If you are introducing new interfaces, so instead of having researchers go to Black Hat and talk about your problems in your new interfaces, do that beforehand and ask yourself the same question. So with that we conclude, and we are open to questions.